Hello and welcome back to Kaladesh, where the fires are still burning. I'm your host, Daryl, and today we're going to be looking at a personal favourite deck of mine, and finally visiting her, Chandra, Fire of Kaladesh herself. Now, as you can probably tell by the previous videos, I'm quite a big red player. I do like my mono red decks. I always started with red when I first started playing Magic, back in the days of 3rd and 4th edition, standard 60 card decks. And unfortunately, my love of mono red and burn has always carried through. But I've always wanted to do something with red which is a little bit different and what people don't expect from red. And this is my attempt at a control deck in mono red. So as I said, the commander is Chandra, the Fire of Kaladesh. She's one of the beautiful, as I like to call them, flippy planeswalkers. So you have two red and one, sorry. You get a 2/2. Whenever you cast a red spell, you untap Chandra, Fire of Kaladesh, and you can tap her to deal 1 damage to target player. And then if she's dealt 3 or more damage this turn, exile her, then return to the battlefield transformed under the owner's control. This ability doesn't necessarily mean that you have to ping an opponent 3 times. So you can ping once, untap her, attack, putting the 3 damage in that way. Just whatever way you can get the 3 damage in to get her to transform into Chandra Roaring Flame. So she starts on a 4 loyalty. That's the +1, deal 2 damage to target player. -2, 2 damage to target creature. And our end goal here is the lovely -7, where Chandra Roaring Flame deals 6 damage to each opponent. Each player dealt damage this way gets an emblem with at the beginning of your upkeep. This emblem deals 3 damage to you. Now, while this might not seem very controlling, I'm not going to lie, she's not. However, I wouldn't change her for the world in this deck. She's just a nice alternate option. So obviously you're going to be trying to control the board state as much as you can. But it's always nice to have that backup plan that you can still ping and burn while at the same point trying to keep a hold of the game. So let's start as always with the land. We're going to be running 27 basic lands. Actually, half decent amount there, with 5 non-basics. The non-basics being Dwarven Hold. This is a very old school card. It comes into play tapped. You can choose not to untap Dwarven Hold during your untap phase and instead put a storage counter on it. Then you can tap to remove any number of storage counters. For each storage counter removed, you add 1 red. There's not a lot of ways to ramp in red. There's not a lot of ways to draw in red. So I consider this land to be a lovely piece of work, to be honest with you. Next up, we've got the War Room. As I said, not a lot of ways to draw in red. So you can tap for 1 colourless, or pay 3 life and tap. Pay life equal to the number of colours in your commander's colour identity to draw a card. Then we have Mikikoru, Centre of the Sea, another legendary land. For tap to add a colourless, or pay 2 and tap, each player can draw a card. Yes, not the best option, being able to give your opponents draw. However, sometimes they can overlook the fact you're a horrible red deck, because you're giving them a card every now and again. Nice for political use as well on your commander games. And then we have Emergent Zone, which you can tap to add a colourless, or you can pay 1, tap and sack. You may cast spells this turn as though they had flash, which, as I'm sure you'll see by the large number of sorceries I run in this deck, is going to be a very useful ability. And then finally, a Buried Ruin. Tap for a colourless, or pay 2, tap and sack, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. Now, as you'll probably notice as we go through the creatures, the sorceries and instants, there's going to be a lot of targets in this deck that people are going to want to get rid of as soon as possible. So being able to recur artifacts from your graveyard, always a nice ability. So we'll move on to the creatures next. I'm running 26 creatures in a whole variety of mana values. Starting them off, we've got a 1 to cast Ruinous Gremlin for 1/1, pay 2 and a red to sack it and destroy an artifact. Now obviously with Chandra's ability where you can untap every single turn, you need a lot of low casting spells, creatures, so you can always make sure that even if you are getting mana screwed, you can always bring something out to get that untap ability keep yourself floating in the game. Next up, we've got the Tuk Tuk Rubble Fort. It's 2 and a red for a defender with reach. It's 0/3, and creatures you control have haste. Obviously, haste is a very, very big part in red. Always nice, always helps you win the game out. And with a defender with reach as well is always quite useful. I find I run a few walls in this deck just because Chandra is going to draw a lot of attention. And walls are always nice and cheap to cast, and good reliable defenders. Then we have the Gargadon Dragonheart. It's 2 and a red for a 2/2 human shaman. You can sacrifice another creature. Until end of turn, Gargadon Dragonheart becomes a dragon with base power and toughness 4/4 with flying and haste. One of the many, many sack outlets we've got in this deck. You do need a fair few sack outlets, as you'll see as we go on. Makers of the Wheel is a very important card. 2 and a red for a 3/3. Pay 1 and a red to sap and sack Makers of the Wheel. Each player discards a hand, then draws 7 cards. Obviously, with a lot of cheap to cast creatures in this deck, and a lot of cheap to cast spells, you are going to be running out of hand size quite quickly. So being able to wheel when you have no cards in hand, and potentially mess up your opponents when they do still have cards in hand, is always a lovely ability. Then we've got the Gargadon Dragonlord, one of these classic level up creatures. So for 2 red, you get a 2/2, which you can level up for 1 red mana. Level 4 to 7, he gets flying, becomes a 4/4, and then level 8 plus, he becomes an 8/8 flying trample with 1 red mana, +1/+0 until end of turn. Now obviously this is going to be very, very good for you in the short game. Don't get me wrong, a 2/2 for 2 is not an amazing start, but the fact you can level it up so you can survive him for the late game as well, hopefully, and get that 8/8 flyer. Next up, we have the Zealous Conscripts. It's 4 and a red for a 3/3 with haste. And as it enters the battlefield, you gain control of target permanent until end of turn. Untap that permanent, it gains haste until end of turn. Now, this is probably where you're going to start seeing the theft mechanic coming in quite a lot. It's one of the ways which I'm trying to control my opponents with this deck. The beautiful thing with this one is it's permanent. So if your opponents have a particularly nasty enchantment or artifact, it's a good way to be able to steal it from them from 1 turn and reap the benefits yourself. It's another sack outlet with Blood Aspirant. It's 1 and a red for a 1/1. Whenever you sacrifice a permanent, you give him +1/+1 counter. You can pay 1 and a red to sack a creature or enchantment when you tap him, and he'll deal 1 damage to the target creature, and that creature can't block this turn. Just the fact that it's a nice sack outlet. As I said, we do need a lot of them in this deck. Then we have the Greater Gargadon, again, another sack outlet. For 9 and 1 red, it's absolutely extortionate. However, it's the Suspend with 10 for 1 red mana, which we like here. It's a huge 9/7. However, the ability which we like it for is to sacrifice an artifact, creature, or land to remove a time counter from Greater Gargadon. You can only activate this ability if he is suspended. So obviously, bringing him out for 1 red mana is always really, really nice. A free sack outlet where you don't have to pay to sack. Yeah, you don't get any real benefit from it, like dealing damage to your opponents. However, it's free. Next is the Captivating Crew. It's a human pirate for 3 and 1 red. It's a 4/3 where you can pay the 3 and 1 red to gain control of a target creature an opponent controls until end of turn. Untap, it gains haste until end of turn. Chandra's Phoenix is a lovely recurable. It's a 3 to cast, 2 red and 1, 2/2 flyer with haste. And whenever an opponent is dealt damage by a red instant or sorcery spell you control, or by a red planeswalker you control, you can return it from your graveyard to your hand. Obviously, there's not going to be a huge amount of flyers in this deck. It's not something we really concentrate on. But being able to recur this Phoenix practically every single turn if you needed to is always a really nice ability. Then we've got the lovely basic Firebrand Archer, 1 and a red for a 2/1. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it's going to deal 1 damage to each opponent. These little effects like this really, really do help to ping down your opponent's life. Yes, it's only 1 damage a hit, but you'll be surprised how quickly those numbers can rack up. It's another sack outlet. We have the Hobble Fiend. It's 1 and a red for a 2/1 with trample. Ooh, useful. But you can pay 1 to sacrifice another creature and give him a +1/+1 counter, which obviously, in the long run, that trample will actually be beneficial for you. Not that you're really going to want to be attacking with him too much, because you want to keep your sack outlets as safe as possible. A rather lovely card here, which I recently discovered, is the Grinning Ignis. It's 2 and 1 red for a 2/2 elemental. You can pay a red to return it to its owner's hand and add 2 and 1 red to your mana pool. The Humble Defector, always a classic. 1 red for a 2/1 rogue, where you can tap to draw 2 cards. Target opponent will gain control of him. You can activate this ability only during your turn. But it's nice to be able to barter with your opponents. Maybe they'll leave you alone for a turn if you give them the Humble Defector. Give them a couple of card draws. As I said, any draw in red is nice. And if you have the option to barter with your opponents, even better. Chandra's Incinerator is a lovely 5 and 1 red for a 6/6 elemental. It's going to cost you X less to cast, where X is the total amount of non-combat damage dealt to your opponents this turn. It's got Trample, and whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, Chandra's Incinerate is going to deal that much damage to target creature or player. Planeswalker, sorry. Player controls. Now, obviously, on a turn when you can alt Chandra and turn her into a Planeswalker on the same turn, you're going to be dealing 5 damage to your opponent minimum. So obviously being able to bring out a 6/6 trample for only 1 red is absolutely beautiful as it is, but having this lovely second ability where you can ping non-combat damage back to their creatures and planeswalkers, absolutely beautiful. It's another wall with the electrostatic field. It's 1 and a red. It's for a 0/4 defender. And just like the Firebrand Archer, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it's going to deal 1 damage to each opponent. Again, really cheap, lovely blocker, and that damage will rack up so quickly. Then we have Nehemiah the Eternal, who everyone thinks should be replacing Chandra as commander. However, he's just not as beautiful. He's 3 and 2 red for a 4/6 with a flicked 3. So whenever this creature becomes blocked, defending player is going to lose 3 life. And the beautiful thing about Neheb is his insane mana ability, which is at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you're going to add 1 red to your mana pool for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. So obviously if you combine him with cards we've already seen, like the Electrostatic Field, or the Firebrand Archer, even Chandra herself, you really quickly could be dealing small amounts of damage and getting all that additional mana for your second main phase. Another wall with the Wall of Fire, 2 red and 1. It's a 0/5 defender with simple pumping. Next up, useful in any red deck, whether it be burn, theft, aggressive, is Torbran, Thane of Redfell. 1 and 3 red for a 2/4 legendary dwarf, and if a red source you control will deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it's going to deal an extra 2 on top. Again, doesn't seem like a lot, but sometimes that 2 can really help you win out the game. Gutter Snipe is next. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it's going to deal 2 damage to each opponent. As you can see, there's lots of different ways where we can slowly ping down an opponent's life. All depends upon how many instants and sorceries we can obviously get out ourselves. Really old school card here. Sisters of the Flame, 1 and 2 red for a 2/2. You can tap to add 1 red mana to your mana pool. Very rare to see anything like this nowadays in red. Again, staying with the older school, it's the Uthden Troll for 2 and 1 red. It's a 2/2, and you can just pay 1 to regenerate the Uthden Troll. Beautiful thing about this is for the 1 red, you're going to get a chump blocker which can save Chandra when you're trying to ult her, save your life total. Just really useful. Highly recommend this card. Galvanoth is 3 and 2 red for a 3/3 beast. At the beginning of your upkeep, you're going to look at the top card of your library, and if it's an instant or sorcery, you can be able to cast it without paying its mana cost. Lovely ability. We run a lot of instants and sorceries in this deck, as we're going to be seeing soon. Simeon's Spirit Guide is an essential card in red. It's 2 and 1 for a 2/2, but the ability we like is the fact you can exile it from your hand to add 1 red mana. So obviously, get this in your opening hand, you're already 1 step ahead of everybody else when it comes to your mana. And similar to our lovely Gremlin earlier, we've got a Torch Fiend, 1 and a red for a 2/1 devil, where you can sacrifice him to destroy an artifact. And then last of all for the creatures, we have a Magmatic Channeler. So 1 and a red gives you a 1/3 human wizard. As long as you've got 4 or more instants and sorceries in your graveyard, he's going to get +3/+1 to turn into a 4/4. And the ability we like here is the tap to discard a card. You can exile the top 2 cards of your library, choose one of them, and you can play that card this turn. While not being draw, it is card advantage, and sometimes card advantage is better than draw, especially if you're going up against people who like to play a lot of cards like Rhystic Study or Hull Breacher, where they're dependent upon you to be drawing those extra cards to get the benefit themselves. This gets around that. Yes, you only do have the 1 turn, but beggars can't be choosers in red, unfortunately. So, that's all the creatures. Let's move on to the instants next. There's only a small amount in here. We have 4 instants. We're going to start things off with Grab the Reins. It's 3 and 1 red. And choose one until end of turn, you gain control of target creature and it gains haste, or sacrifice a creature, then Grab the Reins deals damage equal to that creature's power to target creature or player. So you can pay 2 and 1 red to be able to choose both options here. It's really nice to be able to have an instant where you can gain control of somebody's creature until end of turn though. In a recent game, I really messed up an opponent by stealing their Hornet's Nest as they went to attack me with a massive creature. So not only did I destroy the Hornet's Nest, I then got a horde of beautiful 1/1 Death Touch flyers to continue to protect myself with. Burst of Anger is a very similar thing again. So for 3 and 1 red, you're going to untap target non-legendary creature and gain control of it until end of hand. Word of Seizing is a lot more pricey at 3 and 2 red. However, it does have split second, which means as long as this is on the stack, players can't cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. You can untap target permanent and gain control until the end of turn, of course. Could be a long-running theme in this deck, as you're going to see. And then Active Aggression is 3 and 2 Phyrexian red, which is either red mana or 2 life for each one. So again, gain control of target creature and opponent controls. As you're probably realising by now, this is why we have a lot of sack outlets in this deck. The goal is to slow your opponents down as much as possible. You've got that little bit of red aggro, so if you do want to swing out, you can. However, as soon as they do get more powerful things on the board, take them for yourself. Swing them back in their face, sacrifice them in the second step. There is nothing more irritating, or so I've been told, than stealing somebody else's creatures, hitting them in the face, and then simply just getting rid of them and not getting any benefit from it. It's a good way to really build up the salt level in your games. And now we're going to be moving on to the sorceries. So we've got Hijack for 2 red and 1 to gain control of target artifact or creature till end of turn. Choiceur's Instinct is 3 and a red to gain control of target creature till end of turn, and you're going to give it +2/+0 on top. Threaten, gain control of target creature till end of turn and gain haste. Wrangle is a much cheaper option here for 1 and a red to gain control of target creature with power 4 or less until end of turn. Traitorous Greed, again, gain control of target creature till end of turn, but you also get 2 mana of any one colour, which obviously always a nice option. It means you could potentially use that mana to sack another one. Goat Nap, it's just hilarious. Gain control of target creature till end of turn, untap that creature, gains haste. If it's a goat, it's also going to get +3/+0 until end of turn. Lose Calm, gain control of target creature, untap, and this time though it's going to gain Menace as well. Malevolent Whispers will give it +2/+0 until end of turn, but you have the option for Madness on this one as well. Very little play card now, not surprising really, as it's a massive 5 and 3 red to cast. However, this really can be a game changer and a game winner for you. Untap all creatures and gain control of them until end of turn with Insurrection. Besmirch for 2 red and 1 will let you untap and goad a creature until end of turn whilst controlling it. Shackles of Treachery will gain control of a creature for you again, but whenever this creature deals damage, destroy target equipment attached to it. Now, the rule with Theft is that, yes, you do gain control of target creature until end of turn. And obviously, any artifacts that are currently equipped to that creature will move across with it. However, you don't control the artifacts. You only control the creature. If the opponent has a way to be able to unequip an instant speed, obviously they can do so. But it's a nice option to be able to get rid of those pesky swords and the like. Kari Zev's Expertise is next for 2 red and 1. Again, we're going to be gaining control of target creature, or this time a vehicle as well. But it also lets you cast a card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your hand without paying this mana. Which, as we've already said, we've got a lot of cheap cards to run in here. So odds are you'll definitely be able to get something additional from this one. Songmad Treachery is a pricey one, I'm not going to lie. However, it's an MDF, modal double-faced card, which means you can play it as a land instead. Act of Treason is one of the classic theft spells for 2 and a red, just very simply gaining control of target creature until end of turn. Mass Mutiny is a much smaller insurrection for 3 and 2 red, and you're going to be gaining control of 1 creature per opponent. And then we have Claim the Firstborn for 1 red, where you can gain control of target creature with mana value 3 or less until end of turn. Nice to get rid of those pesky problems that your opponents just never want to block with and always try to keep on the field. Mob Rule is a beautiful piece of work. For 4 and 2 red, you can choose 1 to gain control of all creatures with power 4 or greater until end of turn, or all creatures power 3 or less until end of turn. It's a lot cheaper to cast than your Insurrection. Yes, it doesn't give you quite as many options. However, depending upon who you're playing against, this could potentially be the whole entire board, and again, another winner for you. And then last of all, for the sorceries, we have Unwilling Recruit for X and 3 red, where you can gain control of target creature until end of turn, untap it, and it gets plus X plus Gnaw and haste. So that means we are running at least 22 theft spells in this deck, whether that be from the instants and the sorceries. We've got a few theft creatures in there as well, so you can start to see the different ways you can manipulate your opponent and really control their board state. Move on to enchantments next. We are running 7. And first off, we have Makeshift Munitions for 1 and a red. You can pay 1 to sacrifice an artifact or creature to deal 1 damage to target creature or player. One of the many sack outlets. Lovely cheap one. Next up, Hazaret's Favour, a personal favourite of mine. For 2 and a red, at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may a target creature you control get plus 2 plus 0 and gain haste until end of turn. If you do, sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. So obviously, if you have just played an Insurrection, you're probably not going to have enough mana to be able to tap and sack, or pay to sack, everybody else's creatures. But with Hazaret's Favour, not only are you getting a free sack outlet, you're going to be boosting them all damage-wise until end of turn as well. So obviously combine this with Insurrection or possibly the Mob Rule, and you've got a surefire victory. Sheaven Harvest is a rather disgusting enchantment for 1 and a red, where you can pay 1 and a red to sacrifice a creature and destroy target non-basic land. Yes, I know land destruction is pure filth, but sometimes you have to be filthy to win. A lot of people may give you the dirty look for doing this one, but let's be honest, they'll be getting rid of this enchantment before they do any of your other ones. Next up, War's Toll. Whenever an opponent taps a land for mana, tap all lands that player controls. It doesn't mean that all that mana is going to be available. It just taps in response. And then also, if a creature an opponent controls attacks, all creatures that opponent controls attack if able. So again, a very nice way to be able to control your opponent's board state, limit what they can do on their turns. The thing which I specifically like about this one is when you're playing against blue players, if they have to tap all their lands on their turn to cast a spell, they aren't going to have any free mana to be able to counter yours. Oh, sneaky. Goblin Bombardment is 1 and a red, where you can sacrifice a creature to deal 1 damage to target creature or player for free. Absolutely essential, beautiful card. Took me about a year to find this one. It's so hard to get hold of. But then when you can sacrifice a creature for free, there's no wonder. And yes, you saw it. It's the absolutely beautiful Blood Moon. For 2 and a red, it's going to turn all non-basic lands into mountains. Now, this is what I was on about when it comes to controlling your opponents. I know a lot of people who don't run basic lands. So getting this out onto the field can really destroy their game. And let's be honest, name a red spell that destroys an enchantment. Not going to be happening. And then last of all, it's everyone's favourite red card, Fiery Emancipation. For 3 and 3 red, if a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it's going to deal triple that damage to that permanent or player instead. Yeah, maybe this one might get picked off before the Sheaven Harvest. Maybe. But who can blame him, let's be honest. And then last of all, we're going to be running through the artifacts. We have 12 artifacts in deck. Starting with the lovely sack outlet known as Ashnod's Altar. So for 3 mana, you can sacrifice a creature to add 2 colourless to your mana pool. Again, it's a free sack outlet, and you're actually getting a benefit this time with colourless mana. Next up is the Conjurer's Closet. For 5, you can, at the beginning of your end step, you can exile a target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under your control. Now, the lovely thing about the stack and the order here is you can exile a creature you've gained control of until end of turn, and then when it returns to the battlefield, it's just yours. Really, really nice way to upset your opponents and friends. Pyromancer's Gauntlet is 5 to cast, and if a red instant or sorcery spell or a red planeswalker you control will deal damage to a permanent player, it's going to deal that much plus 2 instead. So it's a very, very similar ability to Bran, but just nice to be able to add that additional damage on top each time. Rings of Bright Hearth is 3 to cast, and whenever you activate an ability, if it isn't a mana ability, you may pay 2, and if you do, you can copy that ability. So whether this be stealing your opponent's creatures, hitting your opponents twice with your ultimate from Chandra, always a nice ability to be able to copy your own. Font of Mythos is the extra power Howling Mine. For 4 mana, you're going to draw 2 additional cards each turn. That's for everybody, obviously. Sol Ring, essential in any deck, of course. And yes, before people comment, there are decks I don't have Sol Rings in, but I don't have enough money or Sol Rings for the number of decks I have, unfortunately. And when it comes to ordering cards, nobody really likes ordering the staples. Well, I don't. Then we've got Burnished Heart for 3. It's a 2/2 Elk. You can pay 3 to sack it, search live for up to 2 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped. Obviously, it's a really nice way just to be able to ramp out. Chandra's Regulator is next, so it's 1 and a red for a legendary red artifact. Whenever you activate a loyalty ability of a Chandra Planeswalker, you can pay 1 to copy that ability, choose new targets for the copy. Also, you can pay 1 to tap, discard a mountain or a red card to draw a card. So 2 really nice abilities in one there. Obviously looting, not always the best option, but sometimes you do have cards in hand that you're not going to want to be playing. And being able to copy all your abilities of Chandra for just 1 mana, Filth. Primal Amulet is next. You cast your instants and sorceries for 1 generic less, and whenever you cast an instant sorcery, you put a charge counter on it. And when it has 4 charge counters, transform. You will get Primal Wellspring, where you can tap to add 1 mana of any colour to your mana pool, and when that mana is spent to cast an instant or sorcery, copy that spell and choose new targets for the copy. So, let's double up those thefts, let's double up that burn. Howling Mine. You should all know this one by now, it's a very, very popular card with myself. So for 2 mana, during each player's draw phase, they could be drawing an additional card. Yes, a bit too huggy for red, but sometimes you need to be cruel to be kind, or kind to be cruel. Lithiform Engine is a 4 to cast, legendary artifact, where you can pay 2 and tap to copy target activated or triggered ability, so again, Chandra or Theft. 3 and tap to copy target instant or sorcery, and 4 and tap to copy target permanent spell you control. And then last, but by no means least, we have the Pyromancer's Goggles. There are 5 to cast legendary artifact, where you can tap to add 1 red mana to your mana pool. However, when this mana is spent to cast a red instant or sorcery, copy that spell and you can choose new targets for the copy. Now, hopefully, you've seen the different ways you could potentially build a deck today and have it be something that's actually going to shock your opponent. Go for something that the colour wouldn't normally do, and you can really throw your opponents off their game. If you'd like to see any more decks similar to this one, please do leave a comment below. Any likes or shares are greatly appreciated. Hit that subscribe button to get alerted for more content. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.